And I just want to make a suggestion to you today. Get your seatbelts on so that we can get ready to minister to the Ruach HaKodesh so that you don't get shaken off, because today's going to be a rocket ride. I believe with all my heart. The Shabbat has been designed so that you could have an encounter with Him. And this is what's going to happen today. You're going to have a divine encounter. So I want you to prepare your hearts, get your flesh ready so that we can magnify the King. We want to do some praise and worship, and we will in just a few moments. But we want to take the time to welcome the one that's the most important. We've welcomed you, and we appreciate you being here by far. Without you, nothing would happen in this house that we're doing without you being here. But on the other hand, the one that's the most important is the King of creation. And we want Him to know that we're here for one purpose and one purpose only. This is not just to have a social gathering. This is not an eating meeting. This is just where we're here to worship the King. The least that you should do is offer yourself, your body, your gift to Him today as a living sacrifice. And so if you would, let's just stand and let's make Him welcome. Let's let Him know that we're here to magnify Him. Will you help me? Father, we bless you, we praise you, we magnify you, we thank you for what you're doing in the earth at this moment, at this time. And Father, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have set aside this day so that we could come before you and we can magnify you, the King that you are. You deserve the accolades, the praise. And Father, the least that we could do this afternoon is to magnify you and to give you the glory that is rightfully yours. And we are determined that we're going to do that. I am not going to glorify my flesh. Say that with me. I am not going to glorify my flesh. So if your flesh is giving you fits this morning, and if you're not, you maybe from the South, you don't understand what it's like to be in a fit. But I've known people that throw fits, get in a fit, have hissy fits, all kind of fits. If your flesh is giving you a fit this morning, you need to say, I am not going to let you keep me from magnifying the King. All right? And so, Father, we bless you. We magnify you. Hallelujah. If you have your shofar, we want to give the blast of the shofar to announce the entrance of the King. His entourage is coming into the house. The Ruach HaKodesh is here. And then we're going to welcome a new hallelujah. We're going to praise. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Amen and amen. Now help me make welcome a new hallelujah, Miss Jean. The highest form of praise is to do what He says and act like He would in the middle of those adverse situations. It's easy. It's easy to praise Yahweh when everything's going all right. Amen. Say amen. But you can make the declaration that I've got a feeling, and there used to be an old song a few years ago, I've got a feeling that everything's going to be all right. And you can say that when it doesn't look like it. Amen? You guys are going to make me convince you, so we're going to be here a long time. You're going to have to act like you're convinced. How many of you have been through some hard times lately? How many of you don't like hard times? How many of you plan on living for a little while longer? Can I just drop some heavy-duty thunder and lightning revelation on you? Can I? You're going to see some hard times if you keep living. Isn't that powerful? And if you know that you're going to see some hard times and you know that that's in your future, then why don't we prepare for it in advance? Yeah, seriously. The New Testament says that we wait until the storm comes before we begin to build a house. If you go back and look at the wise man and the foolish man, go back and study that sometime. It's real simple. One built his house on a rock. The other one built his house on shifting sands, which is usually the way most church folks do. And so when the winds blow and the waves begin to bash against you and everybody's telling you that your house is not going to stand, guess what? It probably won't. Those two individuals had the same vision. They had the same materials to build with. They just chose different locations. Am I right? But what about you? What about you? What are you building on? I'm building on what? Fred, go lock the doors. You got a key, lock the doors. We're not letting nobody out until we finish this today. I'm telling you, we're going to find out this particular Torah portion today that is, oh my goodness, as Father began to reveal some of these things in this Torah portion to me, I'm telling you, it was a personal indictment that was served against me. And Yahweh never gives me anything to share with you without He first doesn't begin to bring conviction on me. Tim, you might want to adjust the volume just a little bit. I'm getting an echo. But when He begins to share things with me and then I have the liberty to bring them to you, I do my best to deliver it in a fashion that's not heavy-handed, even though sometimes it may seem like that. But you may be getting just a little bit of the feel of what I was feeling when He was kind of chastening me. And I'm just going to tell you like my daddy used to tell me when I was about to get a spanking. Everybody look at me. Believe me, this is going to hurt me worse than it will you. How many of you believe that? It didn't. But I appreciated the sentiment. So I want you to look with me in this week's Torah portion. It's entitled Vayishlach. Say that with me. Vayishlach. How many of you looked at the Torah portion this week? Anybody? It's actually translated from a Hebrew phrase. It's actually a Hebrew phrase, and it's translated in the English as, and he sent. And if you read the Torah portion, you know it's talking about Jacob sending some gifts to his brother Esau. He's trying to make things right with his brother Esau, and there's some difficulties going on in the family. There's some family squabbles taking place here, okay? And if you go back and look at this patriarch, Jacob, you'll find out that Jacob wasn't perfect. He was quite like us in a lot of ways, okay? He had issues in the house. Say amen, Brenda. Vayishlach comes from the root of the word shalach, which is traditionally rendered as, in this case, as sent. And it can also indicate to shoot forth. In other words, as he's sending out this gift, something's taking place in the physical realm. He's sending gifts by way of petitioning his brother for mercy. But it's also an indicator that in the spirit realm, he's also shooting for some kind of branch. He's putting forth new life, if you will. How many of you have had plants that kind of got touched a little bit by the cold spell we had, and you bring them in the house and give them a little tender loving care, and they start to put forth new branches, new growth, new life. That's kind of what you can see if you read this just on the surface in the King James English. That's kind of what it looks as if Jacob's doing. But I want to challenge you to look at it a different way this week and to indulge me, if you will. And please, you can take exception to what I'm going to share with you, and that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. And if you want to rebut that or bring something, to me to share that you look at a little bit different, please make sure that it's an educated and informed opinion, because I spent hours looking at this, okay? And I'm convinced that this is a word for us as a body of believers worldwide. This word shalach can also indicate something's about to be put away or cut off. Now, sometimes we think as we're sending something out in anticipation of dickering with the enemy that we're about to bring some new life. But in a sense, when you start cutting a deal with your enemy, you can be about to be cut off or divorced or put away. How many of you have been willing lately to cut a deal with the enemy? Well, you don't have to answer now, but we're going to get into your business before we're over this today, okay? The parsha begins just prior to Jacob's wrestling with the angel, and I know you're all familiar with it. And you also understand that previously, while he was on his journey, after he had confronted his father-in-law, Laban, how many of you have fathers-in-law? Some of you better be thinking about them. Because sometimes you have to deal with daddy-in-law, right? You better know that you're on a right foundation when you go to do so. And I want you to look at some of the underlying things. There's a current. The top of the water looks kind of slick and everything looks okay. But underneath the surface here, there's some currents that are swirling around. And you'll miss it in the King James English. You're going to see something in this Torah portion you've never seen before. And it's going to challenge you. It's going to provoke you. It's going to be like a cuff across your jaw before you're finished looking at it today. I promise you that. While on his way, after having been confronted by his father-in-law, he is met by some Melachim, some angels. That word met there in Hebrew, it's not just an isolated, incidental word. Yahweh is intentional. How many of you understand that this word is his DNA? He coded this language for a specific purpose. So every phrase, every letter, every space between the letters carries a message. If you're willing to look for it, you can find it. The word met here in Hebrew is pagah. And when you see this, the first thing that I did, I'm thinking, wow, why are these angels meeting with Jacob? I had somebody just this week that called me and said, you know, I got a problem with Yahweh. I've read his word. I know what his word says, but I'm tired of not getting an answer, and he needs to come down and meet with me. I said, oh my goodness, you don't know what you just said. I'm serious. This was an hour-long conversation. This gentleman was adamant. He better come down and meet with me because I need some answers from him, and I'm expecting him to. And I said, oh my goodness. Whenever you have an encounter with Yahweh, you may get a hip dislocated. Are you with me? And I thought, I need to find out why these angels are meeting here with Jacob. And it's so important that they meet with him. And this particular meeting wasn't enough. He didn't get the message. And so Yahweh, in the person of Messiah himself, comes down and has a physical confrontation. He has to literally wrestle with Jacob to still try and get this message across. And Jacob still doesn't get it. Later on in around the chapter 35, Yahweh meets with Jacob again. And he tells Jacob some of the very same things that he's tried to tell him in these other two previous meetings. And Jacob finally begins to get a clue. But up until now, the things you've been reading in the King James English, the traditional things you've been taught about this encounter with Jacob, I'm telling you, you're going to look at it a little bit different today, okay? But before we do that, I want to find out why he was having a confrontation with Laban, because that confrontation was part and parcel of why he left and is on this journey, and it's part of the reason he's having an encounter with the angels. Every action you have has a reaction. Say amen. And so whenever you do something, let me just share this with you. You can do it in secret, but it has consequences. You can do it out in the open. It's going to have consequences. Nothing you do just affects you. Say amen right there. Turn to your neighbor and tell them that's been your problem. You thought you and you alone were the only ones affected by your actions. But there's consequences. It's called the law of sowing and reaping. So I wanted to look at this name Laban. It's kind of intriguing. It will give you some insight about what is about to happen here, why this is happening. I want to know why there's a dispute in the family, because this is part of the lineage that you and I belong to. And if what's happening to Jacob is a shadow picture of a pattern of something we can expect in the future, I need to know who my lineage is, my ancestors are. I need to know how they act, how they've acted in the past, so I can plan my reactions in the future. Say amen. So the word Laban, it comes from Strong's number 3835, and it means to be made white, to be purified. It also indicates to make bricks. And I thought, wow, this man's name literally means to purify something. If you purify it, it literally means you're separating it from whatever's profane, or else you may be separating it from whatever's holy and needs to be pure. Because now it's indicating that this man literally brings division, right? If his name means to purify something, if I step into a place, I'm going to purify it, then there's a division about to take place, because whatever's profane is going to be removed from me. And I'm thinking, wow, Jacob takes the initiative to remove himself from Laban. Maybe there's a connection. Are y'all seeing that? And from that previous chapter, before we get into this Torah portion, you remember, what do we find Jacob doing before he leaves his daddy-in-law? His daddy-in-law is kind of conniving. He's deceiving, and he's trying to set Jacob up. And Jacob, I believe, is also a conniver. And Jacob takes it in his hands to separate his flocks from that of his father-in-law. He separates his family from that of his father-in-law's family, and there's a purpose. Jacob is also trying to purify in the natural realm the things that belong to him and separate them from Laban. So again, there's a conflict. Both men are cultivating strife and division. That's not happening in your house, is it? You better smile, because you know it is. It is. You can say amen or oh me or deny. There's some strife and division occasionally gets in your house. You either got to be Laban or you're going to be a Jacob. It comes, okay? And so it leads me to believe that while he has been separating his flocks, trying to purify his flocks, Jacob here, and trying to purify his family from that of his father-in-law Laban, it seems that now this move that he's made is also deliberate. He wants to separate. He's got his flocks separated. He's changed the DNA of his flocks. And it looks to me like what Jacob's wanting to do, Jacob's been looking at his family, and he's wanting to now change the DNA of his family. How many of you would like to change some of your family members? Say amen. I think Jacob should have stopped and dealt with Jacob before he tried to deal with the rest of his house. But I believe that that's what's happening. He's deliberate in making this decision to separate from the house of Laban. And I thought, wow, while he's doing that, he's already taken the initiative in the natural realm, and he has a divine encounter. Do you think maybe the angels are trying to tell you, oh, wait a second, well, we need to tell you something. This wasn't just a visit. Hey, Jacob, what's happening, dude? Where you headed? You know, your father-in-law's behind you. He's coming with a group of individuals to kill you. Did you know that? And did you know that your brother Esau's got 400 armed men? Jacob was between the rock and the hard place. Jacob took it on himself from the natural realm. He's trying to take things in his own hands, and I believe that Jacob hadn't completely heard from Yahweh, or else Yahweh wouldn't have seen fit to send him the angels to give him some instructions. How many of you have been kind of going through some strife and division lately? Maybe it's not in your house, but you know some folks that's been there, and you've been trying to help them. And sometimes we get involved in helping other folks with their strife and division and their separation process. I do marriage and family counseling. And that's what that previous phone call I was telling you about was regarding. Two people that call themselves believers that are separating, and one of them was saying, you know, Yahweh sanctions divorce. I said, never between two individuals that call themselves believers. And so why would I attempt to cultivate more division and more strife on my own without seeking the instruction of Yahweh? Don't you think Jacob may have been a little bit hasty? We're just questioning. We're just asking some questions. Is that okay? He evidently must have been kind of hasty, or maybe was about to make some wrong decisions, or Yahweh would not have sent an angel. I wish he'd send you a few. Honestly, I do. That would save me some trouble. Because I wouldn't even have to show up on a Shabbat morning and deliver these kinds of messages, because during the course of the week, you'd have had a divine encounter. Hello? Say amen. Let's look at Laban for a little bit longer. His name has a numeric value of 82, and I thought, nothing happens by coincidence, even with the numeric values, right? It just so happens, sarcasm is mine, that the 82nd verse of Torah, that's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 2, deals with two individuals being separated from the womb, Cain and Abel. There's that division again. Isn't that weird? And it just so happens that the 82nd chapter, which is Exodus chapter 32, deals with the reintroduction of idolatry to Israel and another separation taking place in the house. And I thought, wow, Jacob is separating his family, and later on in the chapter you see idolatry. And I thought, wow, in Exodus chapter 32, Aaron says to the people of Israel, these be your gods, O Israel. And guess what? You see an opportunity for the seed line to be propagated. The family could be separated, or the family could be made together. You could be in union with the wrong bunch, or you could be in union with the right bunch. Sometimes you need to cultivate some division if it means you cut off something that's offensive to Yahweh. That would have been a proper time to shout. And I thought, wow, this whole Torah portion is about seed line or family ancestry and lineage and idolatry, isn't it? You think maybe there's something to do with that that's causing these angels to decide to meet with him? And I thought, well, let's look a little bit further because, I'm an inquiring kind of individual. I have to have some substance in order to accept it myself, but to bring something that I believe is concrete and conclusive that you don't have a leg to argue with makes me dig it out. And so it says back there in Exodus chapter 32, when these pagan idols were presented to the children of Israel after they had divested themselves supposedly of all of the idolatry in Egypt. They had made their way back. All of a sudden you find them embracing the gods again. And I thought, well, let's look at that for a second. It said there in Exodus chapter 32 that Israel was made naked naked for you. We'd say naked back home. The word naked is para. Say that with me, para. It means they were uncovered. Something has been loosened, and it's kind of compared to a woman caught in adultery, and her hair would be undone and made to fall down loose, and then she would be presented to the high priest and made to drink of the bitter waters of jealousy. And this root para is also the same root as the word for Pharaoh. Say that with me, Pharaoh. And if you remember, Pharaoh's objective was to adulterate or compromise the seed line. He wanted to commingle his seed with the house of Israel, and Yahweh's trying to separate his seed line from that of Pharaoh. Oh, isn't that what Jacob's doing in separating from his father-in-law Laban? Y'all see that? The root of Pharaoh is the Peresh root, which indicates to be fruitful. And back here in Exodus 32, those that receive the gods and begin to indulge in pagan idolatry, which is spiritual idolatry. And when you are engaged in that, seed is released and seed is received. Something's incubated, and the law of sowing and reaping says that conception begins at the moment seed is released. So the abortionists have this thing wrong. And what happens back there in Exodus chapter 32 is that the moment they receive that seed, Moshe comes down from the mountain with the tablets of Yahweh, which represent the instructions of Yahweh for his people, and he sees what happens. And as a result of engaging these idols, Israel is part of Israel, 3,000 of them, receive that seed, they become fruitful, and the house of Levi has to fall on them and destroy them. And I used to ask myself, how would they know who to kill? I mean, if Yahweh tells me to kill somebody, I'm going to be looking out. If Yahweh speaks to me, I want you to go and just fall in amongst this crowd with a sword. I'm thinking, dang, who am I going to get first? Well, if you go back and study Numbers chapter 5, when you receive the bitter waters of jealousy, if you were guilty, then your belly would swell and begin to rot out. If you were not guilty, you would receive seed and conceive. Well, guess what? As soon as they indulged in that pagan idolatrous orgy, if you will, I'm convinced that their belly began to distend, and that's who the Levites, oh, there's somebody that's a grande beragon. Hello? No, excuse me. And that's who they fell on. Are you hearing me? And I thought, wow, what's happening? There's something going on in the natural that's a reflection of what's taking place in the spirit realm. And if you remember regarding Laban is also in this Torah portion going to accuse Jacob of stealing his house gods, his family idols. Can I ask you a question? Now, I'm going to try and take the time to sweep around the audience and catch your eyes when I ask you this question. How many of you are guilty of stealing, relocating, appropriating, borrowing your family's gods? Would you just mind raising your hand? Oh, there was a couple of honest folks. I'm going to show you how we've been guilty of bringing the house gods back in our tents. And so these idols that he's accusing Jacob of, which is a reason that they're separating, is because Laban's given to idolatry. Now, you don't see that in the text in the King James English. You have to do a little bit of digging. But if you research it, you'll find out he's given to idolatry, and it's more than just a casual Christmas celebration. So this thing gets real. It gets down into the roots of the structure and origin of the family, and it has some consequences. And so what did those house gods that he's accusing Jacob of stealing, and Jacob doesn't know anything about it. Jacob's just separating from the family, and he's separating because he knows that pagan gods are in that household of Laban, and so he's removing himself from idolatry, and yet he's being accused of the very same thing. How many of you have been accused of indulging in idolatrous practices? Well, the number one reason is that those idols represented a token as a rightful claim to the possessions and headship of the family inheritance of Laban. That's what ancient treaty language says. The ancient Near Eastern language says that those pagan idols, those house gods, represented the heritage, the inheritance of the family. And didn't you just say that you might have borrowed some of your family's house gods? I'm just asking. Maybe I heard that. If you did, those family idols are going to infect your future inheritance, okay? And Laban knew that, so much so, as an afterthought, he said, well, you took my daughters and my children away from my grandchildren away from me. But he wanted those house gods back because those house gods were directly proportionate to the inheritance that was his. Now, the ancient language also says if you steal those gods, then it's an illegal contract, and so Rachel had no business with them anyway because she'd stolen them. Does that make sense? And the second thing is that those house gods represented the covenant that Laban had with the dead ones, which these idols represented. And so there's kind of a sentimental attraction to these gods that Laban wants back. Say amen. And let me just share this with you. You've been having some issues, and you don't like to admit it. We want to kind of put a pat phrase on it and call it generational curses. Hallelujah. You don't understand. My family went through divorce. Some of my ancestors were alcoholics. Some of my ancestors were straight up pervs. And I'm doing everything I can to keep that from being in my house. But you look around and you see the same thing going on in your house, and it's because you still got the house gods. You took them with you. You're the rightful owner of those things. Hello? Are you listening? Now, I challenge you to refute this. And I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper, and it's going to be a little more than just what you can overtly see on the surface, because I'm talking about more than just celebrating Halloween. I'm talking more about than just celebrating Christmas and bringing that pagan tree in the house. This time of the year, the Torah police, you and I, we're always pointing these things out, okay? And I thought, my goodness, Laban is an instrument here that's affecting the lineage of Jacob. The name Laban hints at building something. It carries with it the idea of a son, the noon, the seed of the heart, Laban, Lamed, baked, noon. The heart produces a son. Wherever the seed's planted in the heart, it's going to reproduce whatever's in here. Oh, the New Testament says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. That's because there's seed been planted, right? And so most of us fail to realize how tainted the seed line of Laban was. Jacob understood to a certain degree, but he could only see it from the natural. He wanted to get away because he had been deceived. He'd been guilty for 22 years, being at the table with a conniving, overbearing, dictatorial slave master, and he wanted to get away from him. That's the reason I left home. And I found out after I left home, it wasn't them, it was me that had the problem. Are you listening? And if you go back and look at the inheritance that Laban was about to pass on to Rachel and to Leah and to his grandchildren and to Jacob, you see generational curses. And I thought, Where and how? Is it possible that as Jacob was separating his flocks and now he's trying to physically separate his family, that Jacob could see that there was something to do with that pagan seed line and the idolatrous practices, and he didn't want them mingled, and so he's trying to separate them again? Can y'all see that? Y'all help me out. If you go back and study ancient history, it says that Laban's legacy is connected with that of Nimrod in Babylon. The sages teach, like Nimrod, that Laban built, worshiped, and sought direction from demonic images. Gotcha. We said we've been guilty of bringing the pagan house gods in. Come on, help me out. But none of us would ever acknowledge that, even in a minute degree, that we kind of helped to build and worship and even maybe have sought direction from them pagan idols. None of us would ever acknowledge that, but I'm going to show you that we're quite proficient at the practice of it. The rabbis teach that he conversed, he spoke with, he had, listen to this, I want to be as delicate as I can. For those of you that are under the age of, maybe I should say, make this, what is PG rating, 13? Okay, we'll try and make it a G rating then. He had verbal intercourse with, he received the seed of the fallen ones, the seed line that those idols represented. You understand? And if we have those generational things in our house, like it or not, if they're in the house, you've received the seed from those pagan idols that are represented by the generational stuff. Oh. Y'all ready for me to quit? The sages teach that Laban was a sorcerer and that he worshiped the serpent. And they quote Genesis 30:27, where it says, when speaking to Jacob a little bit earlier, he remarks, Jacob, I know that you were blessed by the Lord, and I was blessed on account of you. And he said, I learned that by experience. And so if we read that in the King James English, we think it's just because he kind of hung around Jacob and he saw, wow, Jacob's getting blessed and my house is getting blessed as a result. Right? Think about this. A pagan practicing right out in the open idolatry, and I'm going to show you what kind of pagan worship he was involved in, and Jacob's right up there commingled with it, and Jacob's getting blessed, and because of Jacob, this man's getting blessed. Do you think maybe that there's some deception on the enemy's part to make Laban think that Yahweh was the one blessing him? I got news for you. The devil will bless you. Say amen. Turn to your neighbor and tell him the devil will bless you. He says, I've learned by experience. I want to look at that word experience with me. It's Strong's number 5172, and it's the word nakash. Have you ever heard that word before? It's the same word used in Genesis chapter 3 as a reference to the serpent, who was also called the nakash. And so Laban could have said, the serpent told me. I learned by personal relationship with the serpent. It indicates to practice divination, to observe signs or omens, to whisper incantations, to learn by experience. How can you get the training you need? It needs to be on-the-job training. So he gained some experience by intentionally working with this serpent in his life, these pagan idols, and it was that idol that told him that he was being blessed because of Jacob. And so I'm thinking that what Laban's looking at, oh wow, this God that I'm worshiping is pretty powerful himself. Because I'm being blessed even when the godly are among me. Maybe I can continue along the same line of pagan idolatrous practices, because as long as I'm being blessed, it's evident that Yahweh's not going to judge me. I can continue in my sin. My sinuses. And I thought, wow. Let me share something else we did that history says about this brother of Rebekah. If you go back and study and you remember the first time that Laban's mentioned, he seems as if he's one kind of encouraging Isaac. And the servant of Abraham who's there to help get a bride. Come on, yeah, but we know Abraham. We respect Abraham and we want to follow the Torah. So it seems as if he's kind of one of these dudes, just kind of righteous and religious if you just go back and look at it. But you've got to go back and dig this thing out to find out exactly what's in the mind of Laban. The sages teach, and it's from the ancient book of Jasher, and it says this. Regarding the images that Laban worshipped. Now let me share that. I want you to understand. During this time of the year, we nitpick all of the pagan idols that we see when we're out shopping. And I have people, if you want to get involved in a discourse on social media, everybody wants to talk about pagan practices, right? And I'm one of those, I know what's pagan and what's not. Have you ever looked at the money you carry in your pocket, by the way? Has anybody ever looked at that? Have you ever seen the pagan symbols on the money you carry? I've never seen one individual who was talking about others engaging in idolatrous practices that says, well, by the way, my money's pagan, I'm giving it away. Have you? Come on. No, I haven't. Here's what it says about this manner of images, and I want you to hold on. And this is the manner of these images. In order to construct them, they would take a man who was the firstborn. They would usually be the firstborn of an enemy, and they would slay that enemy. They would scalp him, take the hair off his head, and then they would take salt. They would salt the head and anoint it in oil. Sounds like some of the head hunters that you used to read about where they would shrink the heads, right? Oh, it gets worse. They would anoint that head with oil. Then they would take a small tablet of copper. By the way, the word copper there's nakash. And I want you to pay attention to that word tablet because it's the word luach. It's the same Hebrew word for the two tablets that Yahweh gave Moshe. And he would take those tablets of gold and then they would write stuff. They would write a name on it. They would place that tablet under the tongue of that shrunken head. And then they would take the head with that tablet under the tongue and they would put it in the house. And they would put lights before it and bow down to it. None of us would ever do that, but we celebrated Halloween. May not have for years, but in the past we did. And a jack-o'-lantern was originally a cut-off head. That's what it represented. Now I want you to think about that. None of you would do that in the natural, would you? None of you would do that in the natural, would you? None of you would do that in the natural, would you? Wow. You would never be able to worship such an idol, would you? How many of you love me? How many of you in this house have a cell phone? Look at me. Pretty much everybody in here, except maybe Miss Patricia. Give her one. How many of you have a laptop? How many of you have a tablet? Notice that word, tablet. How many of you have used those to cut off the heads of your enemies? I'd never do that from the natural, but you get into verbal confrontation with people on social media, with family members. You use those same things to cut off the heads of your enemies. Say amen or oh me, don't lie. Are you listening to me? Did you know that the moment that you get into a confrontation with an individual and you start to denigrate and defile that person's reputation, that what you're literally doing, you're taking the inheritance that rightfully belongs to that individual and you're trying to assume it for yourself. You're literally killing off the firstborn. Oh, we'd never do that. We'd never engage in that. It literally amounts to stealing the birthright by cursing that individual. And so I have to ask you a question. Is it possible that maybe we got a house god that has the ability to release oracles? That's what they would do. They would come to these house gods and they would expect to get a divine message from it. How many of you have a cell phone? How many of you get most of your information from that divine oracle that you carry in your hand? How many of you ever heard of the mark of the beast that you'd receive in your hand or the forehead? How many of you ever heard it prophesied in the text that we call the scriptures? It says in the last days that we would see all the mechanisms of the anti-Messiah, and his mechanisms would be revealed all around the world at the same time to all the people, and we would see the Messiah appear to all the world at the same time. There's no other instrument on the face of the earth that everybody has access to quite like the cell phone, and guess what? It's right here in your hand. And when you listen to it and you engage with it, it gets right here. Are you saying it's the mark of the beast? I'm saying you need to be really careful, because we look to that as the source for all of our information, and it's a pagan source by and large. Now, you can have the wisdom to discern what's right and what's not, but the vast majority of people spend more time on that cell phone than they do communicating with their close family members. And I would be willing to wager this morning that most of you have spent more time on your cell phone on a daily basis than you do studying the Torah in a month. I ain't scared of any of you. I'm guilty. And we use those things. If you don't think I'm telling the truth, go look on social media. How many arguments, and of course we're just religious debates, and then we denigrate to the point where we begin to assault the character and the integrity, the intelligence of the individual that we're in an argument with. It happens everywhere you look. And I thought, isn't that amazing? All we're attempting to do is to steal that person's birthright. And I thought, you know, as the church, we're quick to point out other people's faults. And one of the things that we're prone to doing is kind of putting a label on what's the worst sin and what's the next worst, and all the way down to where's the kind we can tolerate. Say amen. And most of us don't like adultery. We don't like fornication. We don't like homosexuality. We don't like murder. We don't like stealing. Am I right? And I thought, you know, maybe we need to go back and look at this, the way that we're using our tongue to assassinate each other, because we're talking about what Laban was doing. Laban was using these idols for that very thing. Laban was using these idols as a weapon to control his family first and foremost, and as an extension of that, to control the community. Are you hearing me? And so I thought, I wonder what sin Yahweh thinks is the worst. And I thought, he tells us in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19. He says, a proud look, a lying tongue. I don't have a problem admitting I was probably the most gifted liar you ever run across. Hands that shed innocent blood. I'd never murder anybody, but yet with our tongues we assassinate the character of individuals. A heart that devises wicked imaginations. I'd never do that. Feet that are swift in running to mischief. I'd never go and take what you told me in private and tell somebody else. I'd never take the second and third hand gossip that I just received and repeat it to somebody else in confidence just so that we could pray. A false witness that speaks lies. I'd never do that. I'm telling the truth when I speak those things. And he that sows discord among the brothers. I'd never sow discord in the house just because I came and told you that I didn't agree with that fool that we call the pastor. And I didn't like the direction that he's leading this congregation. I'd never go and spread that junk around and cultivate discord. I'm all about unity. No wonder Jacob said it's time to leave the house. Oh, we didn't see that in this Torah portion. We didn't see that. He would take the tablets, write on it, and take it and put it underneath the tongue of his God that he would worship. And I thought, wow, how many times have I received information and it went right there, right under the tongue. That word tablet is the word luach. Again, it's the same word for the 2 tablets that Moshe received, and it hints at vigor and vitality, strength, the drive or the spark of energy that we get our life source from. It's the same root that you see back earlier in a couple of chapters when Jacob was peeling rods and placing them in front of his sheep so that they could come and consummate a relationship and change the DNA. It's the same word. What Jacob was doing there, he was establishing a fertility clinic for his flock so that he could segregate the DNA of Laban from his flocks, and he's doing that with his own children. Jacob knew about the DNA of Yahweh because he'd seen the DNA helix the first time he came from Bethel. He said, I saw the ladder. I saw the helix of Yahweh, the DNA of Yahweh. Jacob knew it. Jacob knew it. The tablets were of copper. The root is the word nakash. The images held the life force of the serpent. They were demonic. There's that seed lining idols again. Isn't that amazing? But what happens is that most of the time, like in reading these Torah portions, a lot of what you hear in reading these Torah portions are tradition, and we like to hear what we want to hear, in particular when it's something that rubs your fur backwards. Nobody likes to hear that I'm carrying around an idol in my pocket, and quite frequently I take this idol in places just so I can listen to it. And there's times that I'll have a discussion with my wife, and this idol is laying here on a table somewhere, and my wife and I will be talking about it, and guess what? In a little while, an advertisement appears on my phone with exactly the same thing my wife and I was talking about. And I'm thinking, these be your gods. And y'all going to say he went over the edge, he's talking about our cell phone. No, I'm telling you, what you need to do is pay attention to what you hear. Use it as a tool, don't worship it. I never worship it. You can't even carry on a conversation. You carry it into the bedroom. Honey, I got a headache. Children do not converse with their parents. There are times when I'm downstairs at my desk and my phone rings. Honey, what you doing? And I look and it says, Mom. Oh, I would never do that. I would never do that. I take this thing into the bathroom, and I'm thinking, good grief, if it's listening, it's probably looking too. I say, ooh. And the smoke ascends into the heavens. You guys think that I'm playing with you this morning, but this is real. This is exactly what we're dealing with. We just want to hear what we want to hear. And I thought, this angelic visitation that Jacob is having right here, you think maybe it's so that they can get Jacob's attention to reveal the corruption, the death, the idolatry that's currently present in Jacob's house? Jacob thought he had left it behind. Jacob didn't know about the fact that Rachel had the gods. I bet you if he looked back, he'd say, man, that woman was my problem the whole time. But I'm telling you, what happened is that Jacob was willingly ignorant. Jacob looked the other way sometimes, and I've had this argument with people that came in to see me for marriage counseling, and they say, it's, in order to keep peace in the house, I just didn't say nothing to her. I didn't mean to tell on you, Trent. Rather than establish a foundation, say, no, we're not going to have that in the house. I want to be my friend. I want my children to be my friend. I'm not going to talk to them about that kind of stuff. Do you think maybe they're trying to tell him something? So let's kind of look at this train of, can we look at it, this train of thought? Why were these angels having this meeting, this pagah? It caught my attention. I thought, wow, the word pagah comes from a Hebrew root, the pei gemel root, and it means an early unripe fig. When I saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, Yeshua cursed an early unripe fig tree. You think maybe there's a connection? If you read my notes, you already know. There's a connection here. It means something that's an abomination, something that's rejected, blemished, defective, anything that's fastened together but becomes vulnerable to death. It's an encounter or a meeting where there's an outcry, a shout, a harmful union or a trouble that's about to happen, making a person into a corpse. And I thought, wow, This is pretty heavy-duty stuff. Yahweh seen the course of the people that he'd called his children, his firstborn, his sons. They're heading in a specific direction, and Yahweh sends down 2 angels to stop it and get Jacob's attention. Maybe we need an angelic visitation. Maybe that visitation needs to warn us that we may have become blemished and defective. Maybe there's some harm and some trouble that's making corpse among the living house of Yahweh. We look like we ought to have fruit on us, but whatever fruit we bear exposes who we've been intimate with. What message did these angels bring that was so important that it took a second encounter with Messiah in order to continue to get Jacob's attention? And I thought, wow, there's something going on here. How many of you would like to see it? While we were there, I thought, well, if there was a connection with the fig tree here, we need to go back and see the connection that Yeshua had. You remember that? He's between 2 cities when he has this encounter. Beth-Phage or Beth-Pagag and Bethany. The Beit-Pag is the Hebrew word. Pag is the Hebrew word for fig. Beit is house. It's the house of the figs. Isn't that amazing? It was known for that. And the other's Beit Ani, the house of misery. And that place was, this is the name of 2 cities. And Yeshua's walking between them with his disciples. And every time you hear a discourse, he's trying to teach his disciples something. And he sees this corrupt fig tree, which again, you can see that fig tree appearing all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, when Adam and Eve, after having fallen, they're found naked. Oh, isn't that amazing? And they decide they're going to cover themselves with a fig tree. And so there's a connection all the way back there with a seed line and idols. And I thought maybe we need to go back and look in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7 to see why Yeshua's cursing the fig tree. That word for fig in Genesis chapter 3, it's in the Hebrew, and it's te'anah. It's a little bit different than the word pag, but they're both used to describe the fig. And it's cognate with Strong's number 8385, ta'anah. Say that with me, ta'anah. And it's used to describe a female animal when it's in heat. Did y'all get that? It hints at self-deception, lying. The Aleph Nun Hey root implies to be made mournful, to lament, to complain. An occasion or an event where an occurrence is taking place, circumstances swirling around you where you lament and you mourn and you complain and you moan and you groan. We never do any of that. I look in the mirror and I say, you better not do that. And I thought, isn't that amazing? You remember when Rachel has the house gods? How many of you remember that? And she has them hidden in her tent. We're going to look at it a little bit in depth. Remember, she hides them in her tent? And she hears her daddy and she hears Jacob talking about it. And Jacob says, if you find them in my house, whoever finds them, you find them, we're going to die. She ain't going to tell him she's got them. Because he has to honor his word. Somebody has to die, right? She never tells him that she had the house gods. Jacob never knew that. So he says, come on in. You have to understand what's taking place here. She's not in the regular tent that she and Jacob occupy. She's not in the family bedroom at this particular time. She's in the minstrel tent. Not minstrel as the song. Minstrel, I don't know how to pronounce that. She's in the Nidah tent. She says, hey, Dad, don't come in. I can't get up because I'm Nidah, I'm unclean. I'm literally what she's saying is I'm at the time of my life when I'm beginning to be fertile. Remember we talked about one of the definitions for that word is an animal that's in heat. Come on, I'm trying to keep this at least PG. And yet she's sitting on these idols. And while she's sitting on these idols, remember those idols represent the seed line. And her father considered those things living. She's now sitting on these living idols that her daddy would get information from. Oh, talk about it. Needing preparation H. And while she's doing that, she's saying, I'm fertile. You think she's saying I'm fertile just to her father and Jacob? Or maybe she's now talking to these idols that she's sitting on. She's got these idols in her house. I'm ready. Come on. Can I ask you a question? Y'all have heard the definitions here. This is the Hebrew language, not my language. Have you ever been guilty of deceiving yourself? I'm not crazy. Do you constantly mourn, lament? Do you constantly feel sorry for yourself? Do you realize that when you're making those kind of declarations, you're literally making that prophetic proclamation that I'm fertile. I'm ready. Come on, help me out here. Are you listening to what I'm going on? That word te'anah, fig, has a numeric value of 456. It's the same as the Hebrew word etna, which means a harlot's wages. Wow. Adam and Eve received a harlot's wages. Yeshua standing there dealing with the fig tree, and his disciples could be the bride or a harlot. And he's trying to give them some instructions to keep them from being a harlot bride. And the vast majority of those that call themselves believers in the house of Yahweh today are trying to straddle the fence of being a harlot and a pure bride. Listen to me. Seed line and the idols. So there seems to be that there's something or someone in addition to his own fleshly issues, his own carnal nature that Jacob's got to prepare to deal with that has to be rejected, something that's harmful, something that's a union with death, something that means trouble, something that's bringing calamity on his household that he's got to deal with. And Jacob's kind of like got tunnel vision and hadn't dealt with it yet. And so Yahweh sends down an angel to deal with it. He'd not do that to you. He just loves you enough to give you this message. You know what Jacob thought? And here's the same thing you think. Oh, he's talking about Esau. I knew that was the trouble. That brother of mine has been causing me problems for 80-something years. There's where my problem lies. And we always point to the opposition that's outside the house. That's who we want to deal with. That's who we want to confront. And the problem was right in the house of Jacob. And every time he got close to the problem, Jacob would dilly-dally around because he didn't want to see the problem. Maybe it was covered up and swept under the rug. See, we want to deal with opposition outside the house, but when it's in here, that causes too much trouble. Maybe it's not a house god. Maybe it's just a relic, and, it doesn't mean that to us anymore. And we've got control of it. We've been set free from that, but yet we still demonstrate it in our lifestyles. Come on. See, this was what Yahweh has been dealing with me about for the last solid week. And ask my wife and my kids. When I told them, man, I'm struggling with this. Didn't I say that, Mom? So they know I ain't lying. And here we see Yeshua in Luke chapter 19 confronting the very same issues. And I want you to look at that baked aniyah. We're going to look at it. But immediately after he curses the fig tree, Yeshua compares his actions in cursing that fig tree to speaking to a mountain and seeing that mountain cast into the sea. Mountain indicating the head of something. When he speaks to that fig tree, he's telling, listen, you need to learn to speak to the head of this thing. It's not that plant that's the problem. You need to dig out the root and see what's going on behind it. Just because your child's acting a little rebellious, you need to find out why they're doing that and begin to deal with the core root of the problem. Come on. The Greek word for mountain here is oros. And it indicates something that was raised up or exalted, something that was took from another by force that had been committed to it. In other words, it belongs to you, but somebody came in and took it by force. It indicates to take something from among the living and give it to a dead person. And I ask you the question, has anybody ever come into your house and took you by force? There's that sexual connotation. And as soon as he deals with the cursing of the fig tree and gives that explanation to his disciples, you know what the next thing that he does? This was astonishing to me. I couldn't believe that this was making sense. That's supposed to have been funny. He'd go straight into Jerusalem to the temple that he calls my house, and he cleans his house. I thought, go figure that. That's the message that the angels just gave to Jacob. Jacob, stop worrying about what's out there with Esau and clean your own house, fool. That's the hard one to do. That's the hard one. I'd rather clean the O'Brien house. I've been working on that 6 years. They're just babies. This has been 60. And so you can see that I'm kind of tired of dealing with this house, and so it's better for me to just focus on them. You know, I can get a lot of satisfaction in dealing with other folks' problems as long as I don't have to deal with mine. Come on. This is what's happening here. He went straight into his father's house, and cleansed it. I thought, oh my goodness, Jacob was supposed to be doing the very same thing. Let's look at that phrase, Bethany. It's translated as a house of misery, but the ayin, nun, yod, hey root carries the idea of answering or replying as a witness in a legal manner. To witness, to testify, a loop, something that's being bound together, something that's humbled, oppressed, afflicted, to bow yourself down to something. Oh, do you think maybe in the house of misery over in Bethany, maybe they were bowing themselves down to something they shouldn't have been bowing themselves down to? Maybe that's one of the reasons they were miserable. Do you think that sometimes, how many of you know folks that are just constantly miserable? And you ask yourself, life's just too short to be miserable. We knew some folks that all they did was fight. The only thing that kept them together was their mutual satisfaction in fighting one another. And at the time, they'd been married close to 60-something years. And I was counseling these folks, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've seen fighting from so many different vantage points that my wife will never figure this out. And some folks just like to be misery. That was the house of misery. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's because they have something that they brought down from I knew the man, I knew his daddy. And I'm thinking, you think maybe they had some house gods that they brought with them? Oh, I'll never acknowledge it, but this house God sitting right here whispers in my ear. Do it. Say it. Act that way. Feel that way. Poor you. Poor me. Oh, bless your darling heart. Shame on them. Shame on them. You didn't deserve that. Shut up. The ayin nun root is also cognate with the aleph nun root. And that aleph nun root means sorrow, wickedness, vanity, especially the vanity, the empty practice of idolatry. And I thought, wow, Rachel later names her son Ben-Oni, the son of my misery, the son of my sorrow. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's a connection here. Yeshua had humbled himself in the flesh, so he'd already gotten victory over his own flesh. He's on the way bringing his disciples with him. Guess what? You have an entourage. You're taking your family with you. Jacob was doing the same thing. Jacob's on the way to redemption and restoration. And all he had to do was subdue the enemy in his house. Yeshua did that. He was trying to teach his disciples how to subdue the enemies in the house. Jacob was fixated on dealing with Esau. But the problem that I found is that as he later deals with Esau, what he does is he has a guilt complex because of his childhood with Esau. And so rather than standing up and being a man and instead of separating his family, a house divided against itself can't stand, should have kept the family together. We'll stand as a unit before Esau. I'm not going to prostrate myself. But no, what Jacob does, he decides, he's a bad dude. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to apologize. I've got some low self-esteem because of the way that I treated my brother. I'm a liar. I've been called a deceiver and a supplanter, and I kind of mistreated him. I stole that birthright. And so what he does, he goes and takes all of his family and tells them to bow down, not one time, but 7 times, 7 times, 7 times in front of a pagan idol worshiper. The only one that didn't bow was Benjamin, who hadn't been born yet. Think about that for a second. See, Yahweh's trying to teach us something. You know what Jacob does, Ruth? He decides he's going to, divide his house up. In case, he gets the best of this one, we'll have some left. I thought maybe we need to try that. Which one of our children we want to put over here? And which one of our children we're going to put over here? Because, this conflict is coming. Somebody's going to get killed. So which one am I going to save? You're talking about causing a little bit of an issue in the house. Are you listening to me? And I thought, oh my goodness, he separates them, and it's interesting because later one keeps the Torah and the other one continues to bring the house gods with them. And guess what? The group that brings the house gods with them are Joseph and Ephraim. That's us. We're the house of Israel scattered into the nations, and we're known as that. Why? Because we're the ones that still have the house gods. No, that's not us. Well, that word for teraphim there, tav prefix in third person, mean you shall, he shall, she shall, they shall. And the root of it is the resh, pei, yod, mem, Rephaim comes from Rapha, which means shades and demons, dead ones. Oh my goodness. It hints at something that's fresh, healing, and restoring. See, what happened is Laban thought that he could use those demonic influences and revive something. We'd never do that. I got news for you. Jacob still has the house gods of Laban, and Laban's still looking for his house gods in our tent. And I'm submitting to you that Rachel's reaction becomes a generational curse. So I've got a little more than halfway. Can y'all hold on? I'll stop if you want to stop. In Genesis 31:34, Rachel is seen sitting on those house gods. Rachel comes from the Hebrew word Rachel, which means a female sheep. But it also hints at a journey. She's on a journey. She knows that. Her name literally means you're about to take a journey. You, pun intended, y'all missed it. Y'all are slow today. She knew she was going to take a journey. Now let me just kind of set the tone for you. Rachel was a conniver. Leah was supposed to be married first. Rachel and Leah have been fighting all this time for the affections of Jacob. When it came down to it, Laban, the daddy, couldn't trust Rachel and Leah either. They were conniving behind their back. You notice it's always the girls conniving behind daddy. And it's always the man that just ain't got a clue that he's being connived against. Not only did they connive with daddy, they connived with Jacob. Jacob didn't have a clue. He just happy. Which one we going to get the mandrakes from this evening? And if you look, she steals images of Laban. I thought, let's look at her name. The resh means the head or the chief one. The het lamed root hints at profaning something. Oh my goodness. Her name literally indicates that as she's making this journey, she's going to profane the head. Well, she's profaning the head of her household and her father, and she's profaning the head of her husband, but she's also profaning the head of Israel. Scholars agree that Rachel differs a little bit from Leah. I've read this so many times and always felt sorry for Leah. But don't you feel sorry for her? Are you listening to me? The rabbis kind of protect Rachel because she's one of the matriarchs of the clan. And what I'm sharing with you, if you share this with an Orthodox Jew that knows anything about these Torah portions and is probably going out, I may get a few phone calls, but let it be an educated opinion. They don't want to hear what I'm trying to share with you. But they will acknowledge she's selfishly motivated by the need to conceive in order to preserve her place in the house. I've had jealous siblings. I've been a jealous sibling. I was the firstborn, and there was a lot of times that I did stuff just so that I could make sure that my position in the house was safe. Hello? And I've been on the receiving end of some conniving sisters. I know they're probably listening, and they tried to do some things to kind of make my position as the head, as the oldest one, as the firstborn, a little shaky. She was a conniver. The only reason that she tried to conceive, and the interesting thing about it is that her motive kept her barren for a long season. Now, the rabbis will teach you that Leah viewed conception in an entirely different way. The reason that Leah wanted to conceive was so that she could secure the love of Jacob. And I thought, wow. Can I ask you a question? What motivates you to conceive in your relationship with Yeshua? It's so that you can protect your little niche, your little ministry. Is your relationship with Him kind of motivating you so that you know that you can get your inheritance in front of you? Or do you just want to have a relationship because you want His affection? There's a difference between the two ladies. And it's interesting because in this Torah portion, Rachel dies, and Rachel's buried along the side of the road. Leah's the one that's buried in the family plot. Machpelah. Have y'all ever noticed that? And in fact, the rabbis teach us further in 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 2. You can read it. They get a little bit more precise about Rachel's burial place. She's buried in the border of the property that belonged to Benjamin at a place called Zelzach. Say that with me, Zelzach. And it comes from a root that indicates Selim, an image or likeness of a heathen god or an idol. And it has the same numeric value as Itzabon, a word that you see in Genesis chapter 3 when Yahweh tells Eve, because of what you've done, I'm going to multiply your sorrow in conception. Isn't that what happened to Rachel? Her sorrow was multiplied as she conceives Benjamin, so much so that instead of calling him Binyamin, you know, it's interesting because you never find, it was the matriarch's right to name the child. You don't ever hardly find a man say, no, we're going to name him this. She names him Benoni, the object of my misery, the fruit of my sorrow, the fruit of my misery. And there's more to it. And Jacob says, no. Jacob finally got a clue, and I'll show you. She knew these idols represented the right of the firstborn inheritance. She also currently, at the moment that we read this Torah portion, only has one son, Joseph, while her sister's been extremely fertile. Her place is kind of questioned. She wanted to be the number one wife. She wanted to be the first one that was chosen. She wanted to have everybody's attention. She wanted the focus to be on her. She wanted the limelight. I'm the leader. Say amen, Brittany. She wanted everybody to see her position, and yet she had this false piety about her. Rachel's found sitting inside her tent on the camel's furniture. Can I ask you something? Let me just ask you something. If somebody's coming to look for idols in my house, are you going to let an idol worshiper in your house to look for idols? I'd tell them not only no, but heck no. I'm not letting Laban in my house to look for nothing. Yahweh can come and search out the idols, but I'm not letting this pagan idolatrous worshiper come in my house and tell me what's pagan and pure or not. And I thought, my goodness, get some backbone, Jacob. Jeremiah 31, 15 and 17, and you see it requoted back in the Gospels. It says that Rachel would weep for her children who had went into bondage, but they would later return. And I thought, oh, how ironic, because she's about to witness. Rachel knows what she's doing with these house gods. And she knows that she's conjuring some stuff in her house. And she's going to literally see her house divided in front of Esau by her husband. What a tragic thing. she's sitting on the gods. That word yeshav, to dwell with, to incline, to take in marriage. Sitting on the camel's furniture. Camel is gamal, meaning to recompense, something that's ripened, about to yield. It has the kaf resh root, which indicates a saddle from its round seat, but also hints to be plump, to have a round belly. The root is close to words that mean to dance around, to encircle. The sexual innuendo is so explicit that if you could just give your imagination a little bit of license, you can see this woman sitting on these idols that she believes are alive. She believes that they have the word that they can release, the seed that they can release. She's needing another son. She's lost her place in the house, and so she's sitting on the thing. Jacob's been at fault. She's blamed him before. You didn't give me no sons. So now she stole those house gods. She's in the tent sitting on those house gods, and she's moving around dancing. Listen to me. What was taking place was intentional. Can I ask you a question? Was she anxious that they get taken away? Was she anxious for the idols to be removed? No. She didn't say anything about it. Did they represent an opportunity for Rachel to conceive? I'm convinced that it did. We've established that she knew the firstborn's inheritance, and she feels inferior because of her limited ability to conceive. And this is a fertility ritual. These images are never found. She never reveals them, and the text states that Jacob didn't know about it, but she understood that these talismans, these images, these teraphim had been used before as a mechanism to conjure things, to bring the birthright into the household, and she's involved in a fertility ritual. And out of that thing she conceives, and she dies. Sounds just like Eve, doesn't it? Rachel, the rabbis will acknowledge this, is selfish. Rachel feels entitled. She's owed something. That's mine. I want it. Rachel is spoiled. Rachel is not only a rebellious daughter, but Rachel's a rebellious wife. Well, what happened to the idols? If she has righteous intentions, why would she risk her life to conceal them? And here again, the sages protect her pious role as a matriarch. And so, why hint that she's protecting an inheritance? And that's what they use. Well, she just brought the gods into the house because she wanted Jacob to have her father's inheritance. She knew better than that. She knew her husband spent 22 years trying to separate from Laban's stuff. Jacob didn't need her father's stuff. She couldn't have claimed it illegally like that anyway. And Jacob goes to great pains to segregate the two bloodlines, and yet from this point forward, they're still inextricably linked because of the menstrual blood that's shed by Rachel in this ritual. Isn't that odd? Because Isaiah 64 says this about us, that our righteousness is as a filthy rag. And that word for filthy there is the word nidas, a menstrual cloth. I wonder if Yahweh's trying to teach us something. And so as we get further on, Jacob is presented with an opportunity to make some tough decisions. And that tough decision begins back in Genesis 35, verse 2, when Jacob says to his household, he has another encounter after he wrestles with Yahweh. He still doesn't know what's going on. He has the meeting with Esau. Him and Esau kind of work things out a little bit. He tries to absolve himself from all the guilt that he's had in his life from stealing and conniving. He tries to take care of that by bowing himself to the enemy. And even after that, as he continues the journey, he has another visit. I'm thinking, dang, Jacob hadn't learned the lesson. Yahweh's trying to teach him again to get his house clean. And then finally, Jacob says to his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that's among you and be clean and change your garments. How did he find out that the gods were still in the house? Rachel didn't tell him. The text says Jacob didn't know. She didn't tell him how he did it. The angels came and met him for the third time to tell him, get the idols out of your house. Guess what Yahweh's telling us? Get the idols out of your house. Not just the easy ones that you've been so prone to focus on, like the Christmas trees and the jack-o'-lanterns and the Easter lilies and all, not just those things, but the other little hidden house gods that you've been sitting on doing the jig with. Oh, I like these house gods. The kind that you brought from your mother and your father, all of that stuff that you've been bringing into, and guess what? You brought them into the house and you protected it, and you've been passing it on to your children. And your children become the images that, oh, I wish they could get set free from that. How are they going to get set free when you're still keeping them in the house? I want my children set free. I don't want my children to have to go through divorce and alcoholism and drug abuse. I don't want my children to grow up being the victims of abuse. I don't want my children to have to suffer some of the things that I did. But guess what? Because of my poor old self-pity party, I kept those house gods with me. Not so, I really wasn't worshiping them, but it kind of made me feel good to carry them along. And I could point to it and say, this is why I've been going, you don't understand. These house gods have been what I'm suffering because of these idols in my house. Oh, God, I've been so miserable. These house gods have been causing me so much trouble. And every time I turn around, something's happening in my life, and these house gods have been giving me the fits. Wow. The light just came on. I got the house gods with me. Yahweh wants us to break free from the generational curses that have been assaulting us. And I'm telling you, the devil does not have the power to come in your house and determine what's pagan or not. Don't bring Laban into the house. Get Yahweh to come in there and point out to you what's pagan and needs to be dealt with. Oh, where did these gods come from that Jacob just third time? Wow. Jacob just realized the gods are in the house, and as soon as he realizes it, boom, Rachel's dead. There's got to be a connection there. I'm not talking about getting rid of your wife to get the house gods out now. Don't go and quote me on that. But there may be some time that's making the decision to get your house clean may require giving somebody an eviction notice that needs to be out of your house. If they're not willing to repent. Say amen. Verse 8 tells us, at the same time that Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, dies. Remember, she'd been given to Jacob and Rachel and Leah, right? And I thought, why would they just, we want to recognize the fact that this woman passed away, but that's the only sentence there that says, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse dies. And I thought, why is that important? I need to find out what's happening with these gods. I need to get to the bottom of this. But if you look at their Hebrew names, the word Devorah is the word of Yahweh. While the word Rivkah literally means one who ensnares. And so at the moment that Jacob's been told that the house gods are there and he deals with them, the word of the one who's ensnared his house dies. Boom, just like that. Did y'all get that? As soon as he realizes the gods are in the house, Rachel dies. And I'm telling you, folks, the moment that Yahweh begins to reveal the stuff that needs to be revealed to get our houses in order, if we have been rebellious and stiff-necked and haven't cleaned them out, it may require a price higher than what you want to pay in order for the house to be clean. Get your house in order now. Put on some clean garments, wash yourself, examine your house, let Yahweh speak to you, and deal with it. She dies here in the place called Ephrath. And it's translated as either ash heap or fruitfulness. For her, it could have been an ash heap. For the rest of the house, they're now fruitful. Can y'all hold on a little while? I got about 8 or 9 more. I got 10 more slides. Can y'all hold on? By the way, Ephrath comes from the root of the word para. Remember we heard that earlier, all the way back? Peresh, hay, to bear fruit. We get from that para adamah, the red heifer, the one who had to be consumed in order to cleanse. Oh my goodness, Rachel had to be consumed for the house to be cleansed. Do y'all see that? As soon as Jacob told his house to put away their pagan gods, cleanse themselves, and change their garments, somebody died. I'm telling you, this is how serious this is. It may take a while for Yahweh to get our attention, and if we're not willing to submit ourselves to Him, it may mean that we have to pay a penalty in order to clean the house. I would prefer humbling myself first, get the house clean, and then continue on and be fruitful. Ephraim was also known as Beit Lechem, Bethlehem. Isn't that amazing? The house of bread, the house of war. So literally, out of the ashes or carnal flesh, the one who would ensnare the world, by the way, Yeshua ensnared the world, would bind them by a higher force who would come. And that's when Benjamin is born, the son of the right hand. But Jacob changes it from Ben-Oni to Benjamin. In Genesis 35:18, it came to pass as her soul was in departing, for she died. And I thought, well, why didn't you put that there? I could get that. The minute her soul was departing, you didn't have to tell me that she died. So Yahweh's trying to teach you something. There's a difference between the nephesh and this body. And if the nephesh is the soul of the man, the soul is the seat of your emotions. As soon as the seat of your emotions leaves the body, what Yahweh's trying to teach you is get this mind under control if you want this thing to live. Are you listening to me? Ben-Oni. That's my son's name. It's a compound. Now think about that for a second. She's being encouraged. The nurse is telling her, don't be overwrought because you're going to birth this son. And she names him Ben-Oni out of my sorrow. It comes from a compound word, Beit Nun, meaning son, Bain, and Evon, meaning trouble, sorrow, affliction, to exert oneself in vain, wickedness, strength, manhood, generative powers, and idolatry. The son of my idolatry. The son of my wickedness. The son that I got from the generative powers of the idol. That's what she wanted to name this boy. And finally, Jacob had got it in his thick skull what Yahweh's Melachim had been trying to tell him. No, don't let that generational curse go any further. Don't let that name be proclaimed over your house. Change that child's name. Don't call him the son of sorrow. Call him the son of the right hand. Ben-Oni has a numeric value of 119, the same as Baal-zebub, known as the prince of devils. And it's evident that Baal-zebub was considered as the patron deity of medicine. What does medicine have to do with all this? God, guess what? A lot of our idols are connected with the medicines that we have to have on a daily basis just to get by. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep and dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Come on. And it's interesting because Greek mythology considered Apollo, go back and read the New Testament, as the god of medicine. And you know what most of you doctors have on a stick, right? And they attributed to him possessions by a specific entity called a python spirit. Did you hear that? How many of you have heard of the python spirit? If you haven't been connected to the charismatic Pentecostal spirit-filled congregations, you may not recognize that this is a legitimate entity. In fact, it's named back there in Acts chapter 16. You remember when Paul is witnessing to the people there, and there's a damsel that is possessed by a spirit of divination, and she follows Paul, and she's constantly accosting Paul. Paul tolerates her for a while, and finally he turns around and says, "Get out." He tolerated this python spirit. That spirit of divination, the word for divination there is python. And if you were to look at it in Hebrew, instead of python, it would be nakash. Are you listening to me? Idolatry is spiritual adultery. Idolatry starts in the heart. It starts as a craving, a wanting, and enjoying. Sin's pleasurable for a season. Being satisfied by anything that you value more than Yahweh. It manifests. Listen to me. Idolatry manifests especially when you see a python spirit, and you can see it in literal congregations. In fact, I did some research, and there are more charismatic Pentecostal churches, they say, in the state of Florida than the other 50 states. And it's interesting because the different resources that I looked at said that in a lot of those charismatic Pentecostal churches, this spirit of python quite often manifested in the spirit realm. And there was a lot of exorcism taking place. And I thought, oh my goodness, what state is it that's known for all of the pythons that have been loosed into the wild until the southern portion of Florida is so inundated that you better not go out and camp in the Everglades unless you want to get squeezed to death. Just sheer coincidence. It manifests itself in selfishness, ambition, greed, control, and rebellion, being divisive, gossip, slander, lies, manipulation, and attacks upon godly leaders. That's not my words. That came from several different sources to help you understand what needs to be dealt with. So I'm asking you a question. Like the gods of Laban, whose head are you cutting off to achieve your goals? Have you been gossiping? Have you been talking about folks? And I'm not talking about folks. I just pass the information on. I never repeat gossip. I just pass it on. If you repeat it, that means you just say it again, right? We don't. Remember on Hee Haw? That's why they used to say, we don't repeat it, we just pass it on. We just say it one time. Your words become the copper tablets under your own tongue. Like Rachel, can I ask you a question? Which idols are you sitting on? Keep it up and watch your own house become divided and your dreams die when you give birth to sorrow. Jacob recognized it finally, and Jacob makes a prophetic declaration that the son of the right hand had come forth. The first commandment says, thou shalt have no other Elohim before me. Don't bring any gods into my house. The original idol was that serpent. That python spirit is still alive. And I showed you there what Paul was dealing with. To accomplish its deadly agenda, the spirit will remind you of wounds from your past. Every one of us, by and large, over the last few weeks and months of years, have been dealing in our mind with things that we suffered in the past. I just had to lay my own mother to rest back in August, and my sisters and I had suffered horrifically, and it's the hardest thing that I've had to do in 60 years to go back and face the woman that had been the source of abuse for me and my sisters. I'm talking about rape, incest. I'm talking about one of my sister's daughters being sold into prostitution. I'm talking about being beaten and attacked. And you can sit around and you can say, you know, this house God is so horrible. You know, I'm just messed up. My wife will tell you he can't be fixed. He's just messed up. He's constantly depressed. He can't even give you advice on how to live because he can't live. Our house is so, hold on for a second. Our house is so messed up we can't ever get ahead. We have so much turmoil and strife going on in our house. Well, you know, it's because of his childhood. And his first marriage ended in divorce. He's got children that went a different direction. Everything he ever put his hand to, everybody he ever knew and loved, stabbed him in the back, and he lost it. You see the point I'm getting at? It manifests itself when it tries to remind you of all your wounds from the past and surround you with ungodly influences that will tempt you to compromise the word of Yahweh by getting you to hold this for me, Ada, by getting you to just continue to keep it. You don't want to hold these house gods for just a minute. You don't want to wallow in self-pity. You don't want to remain a victim. Don't you want to continue to get that crazy check that you've been getting from the welfare? You're entitled to it. The state owes you. You don't have to worry. You're entitled to this. It'll continue to barrage you with circumstances that'll knock the wind out of you. And as soon as you get to knock the wind out of you, see there, it was this house god. Honey, I told you I just can't get free from that. Well, you know something, honey. It's your fault. You brought those idols in the house. Maybe we need to divorce. I believe the Lord's telling me to divorce you. It may include weariness, a loss of passion to worship and pray, feeling pressured, overwhelmed, helpless, and even hopeless. The severity of the symptoms depends on how long the enemy's been coiling itself around you and squeezing the literal life out of you. And all this time it's squeezing the life out of you. You thought you were just getting hugged. How many of you want to be set free? The python spirit works through lies and manipulating information. What? What? You think maybe there's a python spirit? You can laugh if you want to, but I'm telling you, if you don't start being very careful with this instrument right here and what you allow to come into these gates, you're not just this one, but this is one of the primary ones. This one right here, I believe, is affecting the world more than any that I know of at the moment. And it's about to increase. They're about to go to a 5G. You know what that means? The EMF, that's the electromagnetic frequencies that are about to be released. And they're going to start putting them in proximity to your houses and your place of business. They're going to start doing things with that 5G technology to assault your mind with these low frequency waves, to literally bombard you with stuff, and you're going to be thinking, oh God, wow, why do I feel so bad? Man, I just feel like I'm depressed. What? I'm depressed? I just heard that. I'm depressed. You know something? You look sick. What am I? You look like you got a fever. Well, I'm kind of hot. I'm telling you the honest truth. How many of you just a couple of weeks ago got a text message from the President of the United States on the emergency warning system? Anybody in here besides me? What? You think that's an accident? Don't you think that they're trying to send a signal, a message to everybody that has one of these in their hand to let you know what's about to happen, to speak to you, to give you the divination that's pertinent to the way that you need to be living? I don't know about that. Well, it's going to be a form of control, and I know this will probably be censored. You got to watch what you say. You got to watch what you listen to. You got to watch how you talk about your brothers. You're going to have to you're going to have to be careful about what comes out of your mouth, in particular what you say in your household. Do you have any of these house gods? It seems like a weird way to end after all of that and say, Shabbat Shalom, Sabbath peace. Sabbath peace, hallelujah. Bless your darling heart. Glory to God, be at peace. Have you ever looked at the word shalom? Do you know what it costs for you to have the kind of peace that you should be walking in? Excuse me, this house got on my neck here for a minute. Shin Lamed Mem. The Mem indicates something that's about to be birthed, a womb. The Shin Lamed comes from a word that means a sin that requires a death penalty. And you see it used when the individual reaches out to touch the ark that he sees about to stumble and he's struck down graveyard dead. And so in order for you to have shalom in your house, there was a grievous sin that required the death of someone to be birthed into the world. And so if you want to be set free, somebody's already paid the penalty for you to be set free. And I know, see, the first thing you're going to do is, oh, if I get up and come down there, he's going to know I've been struggling with these house gods. And if I get up and move, he's going to know that I hadn't got him out of the house. And so you're going to say, they don't mean, these aren't house gods. They're paperweights. And they're just here to keep my books from falling over in the bookcase. My children are messed up. My grandchildren are struggling. But it has nothing to do with these house gods. These are nothing but, lifeless objects. And so you won't move. And Yahweh will send you a second message after this one. And you still won't have a clue as to why stuff's happening in your house, why there's so much turmoil, why you're struggling just to make the ends meet, why you have more month left at the end of your money than you can ever imagine, why you stay more broke than the fourth commandment, why there's fractions in your house and your family, why you can't get along with your husbands and wife, your children, your grandchildren, your extended family, why there's constantly turmoil and confusion and division swirling around you. You can't figure it out. It's just this weight. It's just this weight. I believe if you want to be set free, you can. How many of you believe that? Hallelujah. Father, I'm asking you to speak to our hearts this afternoon. I believe that this was a word for me. And I know how many times in the night season that the enemy whispers things into my head to remind me of my past, to remind me that, oh, yeah, you're a victim. You've suffered. And Father, I thank you that your word is true. And every other voice is a liar if it doesn't say what your word says. And I thank you, Father, that from this day forward, I'm going to qualify what I look at and what I listen to and what I allow into this house. Father, I make a confession before these people to you publicly that I am not going to allow the house gods of my family's lineage to be passed down to my children or my children's children. I break the power of words that have been spoken over myself, my wife, and my children and my grandchildren. I break that power in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Father, I thank you that doors that may have been open in my past because of the sexual abuse that myself and my sisters were forced to endure, because of the physical abuse that we were forced to endure, because of the hardship being thrown away, because of all of the things that happened to cause us to think less of ourselves and what you say we should, because of the isolation, the depression, the frustration, and the worry, all of that junk, Father, those doors that were open, I say, you go now, and I shut that door in the name of Yahweh the Most High. And Father, should the enemy try and come in again in any of these areas, I make the confession and declaration before you that I will not tolerate the house God. I'll not tolerate it. I will not be a victim. I'll not walk around with it. I'll not tolerate it in my house. In the name of the Most High. I'm the head and not the tail. I'm blessed coming in. I'm blessed going out. I thank you, Father, that I will not entertain anything that someone else brings to me and shares with me to bring strife and division regarding a brother or a sister or a loved one. Father, I declare before you and before these people that if I can't build up and edify and comfort and strengthen the people, I will not say anything. I will not entertain gossip and backbiting and sowing seeds of discord. I will not entertain it. I'll not allow negative words to the best of my ability. I promise you that, Father, to come out of our mouth. I will no longer say my house is broker than the fourth commandment. I will declare that we have store in the house. I will make the declaration that's necessary to see this house changed. And if you can say that and agree to it, you need to be saying amen. And amen. If you're here and you'd like some specific prayer, we will take the time to pray for you. If you're listening via the internet, you can go to our website, find out how to contact us, or you can contact me personally, 228-324-3368, and we will do everything that we can to make sure that we help you to get through what you need to do to make the proper decisions to get the pagan idols out of your house, to break free from the generational curses. Can you say amen? Amen. Hallelujah. Give him a praise offering. Hallelujah. Victim or victor? Overcomer or overcome? We've got to do what Yahweh calls us to do. And if we don't do that, he will raise up a generation that will. You ready? Are you excited? Hallelujah. I'm telling you, I know that this was a difficult word. I do not apologize for the word. I'll apologize for the way that I deliver it, because sometimes I can't get it out the way that I hear him speaking to me. But I'm telling you, this was a word from me. And if none of you show up the next weekend, we're going to do what Yahweh's called us to do. We have an inheritance in front of us. I want that. But you know that what means most to me is having his affection and his attention. And anything that comes between me and Yahweh, and I know we laughed about the cell phone as a demonstration, but I'm telling you, you guys know it's the truth. You can't even carry on a conversation with your family. We've forgotten how to talk. We've forgotten how to communicate. It's time we make some changes. Amen? Amen. Give Yahweh a praise offering. We're going to change directions.